Hello, and welcome to the Dementia Capable webinar series provided by the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving in partnership with the Georgia Division on Aging Services. Before getting started, we advise having a pen and paper ready to write down any information and links to the resources as they are provided. Otherwise, you will have to view the webinar again to retrieve it later. You may pause the webinar now if needed. Remember that the link to the SurveyMonkey PostTest will be pasted onto the last slide. The PostTest will remain open for an indefinite amount of time. Please take it at your earliest convenience, though we encourage immediately following the webinar. A certificate can be provided when entering your email address at the end of the PostTest. Today's webinar will be Tailoring Dementia Services to Family and Individual Needs, presented by Naomi Latini. Naomi Latini is the Training and Implementation Specialist at the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving at Georgia Southwestern State University. In this position, Naomi provides technical assistance and consultation to the RCI's Dementia Support Program sites, known as RCI REACH, as well as their military support program, Operation Family Caregiver. Naomi holds a Master's of Science in Sociology from Valdosta State University and a Bachelor of Science in Sociology from Georgia College and State University. Since receiving her graduate degree in 2007, she has been an adjunct professor of sociology and women's studies at multiple universities and colleges around Georgia, to include Georgia Military College and Clayton State University, amongst others. Welcome, Naomi.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for that kind introduction. As an introduction to what we're preparing to talk about, just a little blurb here. Knowing that many caregivers of loved ones with dementia have similar needs, there are also needs that are unique to each situation. And so what we're going to be looking at is person-centered assessment and planning that's going to encompass the skills required to connect with each person you speak with, to respond to their needs in a focused and yet a personal way at the same time. So this webinar should assist service providers in first establishing rapport and then probing and identifying the most challenging needs specific to each caregiver that they're speaking with. So I mentioned there building rapport. Building rapport seems like something that just should happen or does happen kind of organically or not. But in this case, if someone calls your agency and they're stressed out and they have very specific demands, they don't know you. They may not have ever met you before, and you don't know them. So there can be challenges trying to connect with that person, especially if oftentimes they've been reaching out for help at other agencies and haven't been getting the answers that they have been wanting to hear. So there are some unique challenges in your situation. First things first, remember that caregivers want to be heard. I know how easy it is to get caught up in the day-to-day of our jobs with people calling us and, what to us sounds like complaining, or maybe they're angry, they're frustrated and they're stressed out is what it is, and they're looking for help. And so it's important to allow them to tell their story. The more you can learn about them on that very first call, the more fires you can put out, if you will, and the more likely you are to reduce them from having to call back multiple times with different issues. So if we listen to their entire story and really try to pay attention to what they're saying, hopefully we can knock out a bunch of their issues just in this one phone call. And remember, it's probably been a long time since anyone asked them how they are doing. If you think about that in your own personal lives, if you have children or elderly parents or a child with special needs, people ask you how that person is doing, right? So it's the same for caregivers of someone with dementia. Your dad has dementia, and they say, oh, hey, how's your dad doing? How often does anyone say, how are you doing with everything? That sentence alone could completely change things around for them and help them to feel like, wow, this person I'm talking to actually really cares about me. I mentioned that rapport building can happen sort of organically at times, but there are some unique challenges in this situation. So there are some keys in particular to building rapport in the situation that you will be in with these stressed out caregivers. The first, as I said, is to listen to them. Allow them to tell their story and listen to what they are saying. You might even want to be jotting down quick notes as they're talking. You want to validate what they're saying. So if they're saying, it's impossible to get help in this town, you might say, I know how frustrating it can be to try and find exactly what it is you're looking for. Something along those lines so that they know that you understand as best you can how they're feeling. Try to find some common ground. If you have been a caregiver yourself, this would be great to tell them. That's one of the primary keys to rapport building is to say, I have been in a very similar situation to you. Although I'm not in the exact same situation, I have been in one that is similar. Even if, it's not trying to find help for a loved one with dementia, you yourself have been in some situation where you've been trying to get some kind of assistance and haven't been able to get what you've been looking for. So if that's the issue at hand, then share that with them if you feel comfortable, without breaking your own personal boundaries so that they know you kind of get where they're coming from. And that kind of falls in line with being empathetic, not sympathetic. We don't feel sorry for them because these are strong people, but we do have empathy for them and what they're going through. So you can express that to them as you're talking. And because they're caregivers, one of the important things to building rapport is providing hope as you begin to determine their most pressing challenges and discover how you can help. So as I said, if you've been taking notes while you're talking, then you can say, okay, it seems to me like you've got X, Y, and Z as an issue. Is that correct? Great news. We've got some stuff we can at least lessen the burden of with all of these things. And when you do this with caregivers, you can see them almost like have a physical, like a letdown of emotions because they're like, finally, someone actually listened to me and is going to be able to help me. And even if you don't have the tools necessary, you hopefully will have the knowledge to help them find the tools elsewhere. And one of the things we'll be talking about here is using technological supports for that. So after each section we discuss, we'll talk about technological supports. So after the rapport is built, you feel like they're as trusting of you as they can be after just a phone call. Summarize what they've told you. Like I said, say, okay, you said you have X, Y, and Z as an issue. If you notice something that they didn't mention as a problem, but as a professional should be addressed, you can gently mention it. For example, if the caregiver casually mentions that their loved one with dementia is driving, but doesn't say anything about it being problematic, like, for example, that it's her husband who has dementia, and casually in the conversation she said when he goes over to Walmart and picks up his medications, then that lets you know that he's probably driving. So you could say something like, let me go back to something. You mentioned your dad picking up prescriptions. Is he driving still? How is that going? Because they may not know that driving is unsafe with dementia. So here you kind of have to feel them out before offering suggestions, because for some people that's just not a boundary that they're willing to cross yet. That's not a freedom they're willing to take away or even broach the subject. For other people, however, they may say, yeah, I've been trying to get him to stop driving, but I figured there's nothing I can do about it. And so if that's the case, then you have sort of an in to be able to have that conversation with them as well. So I guess a point of all of that is just to really listen to what they're saying and pay attention to them so that we can help them as best we can. Now, technological supports for rapport building. I mentioned everything we talk about. I'm going to go over some innovative ways that people can get help without having to leave their house or by using the internet, basically. One of the cool things that we do here at the Rosalind Carter Institute is use video conferencing when possible with caregivers. And this actually has changed a lot for us because they're able to see us and we're able to see them. So I know not every agency would be able to do this, and not every caregiver is going to have, a smartphone or a computer with a webcam. But I know some agencies around the country have already instituted this, where when someone calls, it's automatically a video conference. Even if you can't see them, that they could see you. That would definitely increase rapport so they can see your face. So, and there's free ways of doing that. So just something to think about for the future if you're not already implementing this. Definitely helps to increase rapport building if you're able to see one another. Okay, so now that we have a glimpse into their lives, you've heard their story, let's consider some priorities. These are listed in order-ish, but also not, because we could move things around, with the exception of the first one, safety. Safety needs I would definitely want to consider very first thing, and we're going to talk about what those safety issues might be in just a moment. Safety issues are ones that we want to make sure they at least have the education on. What they choose to do with that education is up to them, but at least that we have given them the tools to make their home and their environment and their loved ones safer. And then again, they can do with that what they want. Then their physical health. How often do they go to the doctor? Are they managing their medications, etc.? And also their emotional health. Most dementia caregivers are stressed out and burdened and even depressed. So that is definitely something we want to address. Do they have social support? Are they isolated, as that often happens with dementia caregiving? Are there unmanaged behavioral issues that are, causing extreme stress and maybe also causing safety issues in the home? And then lastly, who is a part of their care team? Or have they built a care team? Have they even heard the term care team? So all of those things we're going to talk about today, and some of them are going to overlap with each other, and some of the technological supports for them will overlap with each other. But we're going to go through each and every one of them in detail, starting with safety. As mentioned, I always want to address safety first. Some things that would alert me that there are safety issues, as I mentioned, if the care recipient is driving, if the care recipient is wandering or is at risk of wandering, if there are guns in the home that are accessible to the person with dementia, and of course, the normal stuff like do they need grab bars or potty chairs or, things for physical accessibility in the home. Those are also safety considerations that are a little bit more tangible. So what could we do about some of these things? Of course, number one is providing them with education, educating them on the dangers of someone with dementia driving, the dangers of wandering, the potential dangers of having guns in the home. Some technological supports. There's so many of these also. Something as simple as a nightlight might help, like falling, for example. There's also monitoring sensors that can be placed around the home. These could be good for if the care recipient has to be left at home alone. You can actually get monitoring sensors that will connect to an app on your phone, so that if the door is opened or even the oven is turned on, your phone will be notified even if you're not there. And some of these are not as costly as you might think that they would be. You can get, for the car, for the driving, of course there's lots of things you could do for driving. You could have the doctor write a prescription that says no driving due to the medication you're taking. You could advise them to take away their keys, but that can cause problems. Something that I found that's relatively cheap, I want to say it was like $40, is a no-start car battery switch. It's actually a device you install on your car battery, and you can turn it on and off. So maybe under certain circumstances you let them drive and others you don't. This way you don't have to take the keys and have that confrontation. You can just turn the battery off, and so when they try to start the car, they literally can't. So that's kind of new and innovative. You could get a door alarm or a mat alarm. There's, like for wandering, there's even a mat that you could place by the door that will notify you if it's stepped on, so even if they're attempting to leave. Or you could put that same mat by the bed, like at night. So if they're wandering at night, the mat could be by the bed, so if they step out of the bed, you'll know that they're up. So all kinds of innovative things like that. For guns, of course, gun locks and gun safes. Most sheriff's departments will give you gun locks for free, so that's something to think about. And then there's also remote access to door locks and appliances. These are really neat and innovative, I think. So like for your air conditioner, that's a relatively common thing. Air conditioner, heater, you can set it up so that it can be connected to the caregiver's phone so that they can kind of control the AC, but they also have that for like the refrigerator and the oven and just anything you can think of. And again, they're not as costly as you might think. I would advise advise the caregiver to look at the Alzheimer's store, and you just Google the Alzheimer's store, and it'll be the first thing that pops up. They have thousands of different innovative stuff like this to help with different safety issues. Everything from putting, stop signs that you can put in front of a door to prevent wandering, to these, no-start car battery switches. So there's a wide range of things that you could use for that. So the Alzheimer's store, I definitely recommend that to all the caregivers that pass through here. Okay, so let's talk about physical health. Now, I mentioned I would address safety first. The rest of these, I think you will have to choose which seems the most pressing to your caregiver that you're talking to. But physical health for both the caregiver and the care recipient is obviously very important. So asking questions like, when was the last time they saw their doctor? Do they have any issues with their health that haven't been addressed? It's very common to be a caregiver and to have your own health care issues, especially if we're talking about a spousal relationship, so someone who is elderly, and they're not taking care of themselves. And they may say, oh, yeah, I'm diabetic, but I don't have time to go, get my blood sugar taken, and all of that is just too much. I've got to deal with my husband or whatever. Are they taking their medications regularly? Really, all of these things could be considered for both the caregiver and for their loved one, because it could be that the dementia has progressed to a point where they're no longer concerned about their loved one's physical health so much as they are just managing the day-to-day things that are going on. Luckily, there are all kinds of things that you can do for health technologically. You're going to see apps multiple times because there's so many awesome apps. Most people have a smartphone, and if the caregiver doesn't, these apps you can use on the computer as well. Of course, I'm going to suggest other things other than just apps in case that's absolutely not a possibility. But there are disease management apps, health tracker apps, sleep tracker apps, like all kinds of things like that will remind you of, some of them are specifically for caregivers so that you can monitor your own health as well as theirs. You can enter in it'll take your heart rate for you. I mean, just anything that you could think of that they'll track. Smart watches, now these, you think of something like an Apple Watch, of course that could run you hundreds of dollars, but there are other versions of it that are not quite as fancy that are less than $50. And they'll all do the same thing not all the same stuff, but a lot of the same stuff as an Apple Watch would that has those same trackers and stuff for health on it. And then moving away from that a little bit, things like automatic pill dispensers. There's automatic pill dispensers that even have reminders. So it'll say, some of them you can even record, the caregiver can record their voice and say, hey, it's 2 o'clock, it's time for your, whatever pill, and then the pill will pop out. There's also alarm clocks that you can put your own voice into as the caregiver that will say that as well, like other than just for remembering to take pills, but like for eating. Eating is important for health too. There's alarm clocks that the caregiver can speak into and say, hey, Dad, don't forget your sandwiches in the refrigerator, or, whatever you wanted to say. So there's plenty of things out there like that that can be supportive of the caregiver and the care recipient's health. So emotional health and well-being. This is just as important as their physical health. And some might even argue a little bit even maybe more important, because if we're not taking care of our physical health, then our emotional health is going to go down. So emotional health is one of the big ones. And again, you could move these topics around when you're kind of prioritizing with your caregiver, depending on how stressed out they might be. But if you notice that the caregiver is stressed, take time to address that with them. You can ask them things like, what are you doing to be sure that you're taking care of yourself? And when do you get downtime just for yourself? Now, they may think you're crazy for even suggesting this, but that's okay, to plant that seed and let them know that it is okay for them to take time out for themselves. Not just okay, but imperative, because they will burn out. And what that looks like for each person is different. Sometimes a burnout looks like someone throwing in the towel and placing their loved one in a facility. Sometimes it looks like the caregiver having a heart attack. Sometimes it results in drug and alcohol abuse or elder abuse. So it can have serious and both legally and financial consequences when someone burns out. So you may want to ask them if they have respite services. Have they tried adult daycare? Do they have family that can help them to get a break? Is there anything at all that they can do? And if they're like, no, I don't have money for this, maybe in your agency, the hope would be that you have resources that you can offer them, or things they can sign up for through your agency that can help them to get a break. And, of course, you would be walking them through getting over the guilt of doing that. And talking about family, helping them to get a break, that's something that's going to come up again in just a moment here, because we're going to talk about care teams, which some caregivers have never even heard the term. So we're going to talk about that. Here's a great link if you want to take the time to write that down. And I know it says fitness, you see health and fitness, but this link actually takes you just to a list of apps for all kinds of health issues, both emotional and physical. There's also, like I said, if you were to Google like caregiver apps, you can find all sorts of stuff there as well. That's going to come up again in a moment when we talk about the care team as well. You can, through even one of those cheap smartwatches that I was talking about, you can track your sleep. You can do guided meditations or guided imagery. There's quick mood boosters. I didn't put this site up on the PowerPoint, but you might want to write down the website, clearerthinking.org. That's clearerthinking.org. It's been recommended by Washington Post and all kinds of different places, and we use it here at work. It has, and it would be on a computer, not an app, but it has 3-minute and 5-minute mood boosters that are actually, I don't know if they call them evidence-based, but they do a pre and a post-test to measure, and so they can prove that what they do works. And so every now and then, again, at work, I do them myself if I'm feeling grumpy. They also have little things like that for motivation, for calming you, for helping with anxiety. So I certainly recommend that. I've recommended it to all my coworkers, and I would recommend it to you as well, the clearerthinking.org. It's an excellent source for all different kinds of stuff, and you get to learn more about yourself. Okay. So we were talking here a little bit about if they had family maybe that could help them. So let's move on and talk about that social support. I went backwards. Forgive me. Okay. Here we go. Forgive me. Social support. Addressing social support is critical as dementia caregivers often become isolated. Dementia caregivers don't want to leave the house after a certain stage because of a lot of different reasons. Perhaps the care recipient acts out when they go out. Maybe they're incontinent and they're scared they're going to have an accident. I know with my own grandmother, all her social inhibitions were gone when she got dementia. So if we went to the grocery store and she saw someone whose appearance was not flattering to her, she would just tell them. And it was humiliating to me and I'm sure to the person she was speaking to. So we got to a place also where we really just tried not to take her out. But what that meant is that someone had to stay home all the time. And that can become extremely depressing. The other side of that is that when someone gets sick, people tend to not want to kind of come over anymore, right? Think about in your own lives, you find out someone has cancer or something like that, and you say, to the family, oh my gosh, that's horrible, let me know if I can do anything. But then that's it, because you think, well, I don't know what to say, or I don't know what to do. What if I say something offensive? What if they act out while I'm there and I get embarrassed, or what? It brings up unpleasant feelings. So it's normal in our culture for people to back off when someone is ill. So for those two reasons, people that are caring for someone with dementia often become isolated. Social support doesn't have to just mean a support group, though, although of course it could, but it really just means who is in their lives that are supportive of them in their caregiving journey. That could be a long-distance friend. It could be even like people on their Facebook. If they do social media, Facebook friends, that's a form of social support. Their church. It could be anyone. So technologically speaking, if they don't have resources to physically go to a support group, there's another link for you, dementiacarecentral.com. They have a list of online support groups and online support forums. There's a difference in a online support group and an online support forum. An online support group is like actually a group that meets and kind of talks in real time, like chatting in real time. And then there's also online support forums. The Alzheimer's Association has one, as does several other agencies, where you can go in and ask a question and post it, and then other people will respond back to you. Like maybe you post that you're having trouble with some particular behavioral issue. Well, other caregivers there can chime in and say, hey, I had the same thing happen to my mom. Here's what I've been doing about it. Facebook also has several groups. I myself am a member of several of them that are just for dementia caregivers that are very similar to just a forum where you can share stories, challenges. A lot of them you can even post anonymously in. So like you message the person in charge of that group, and then they'll post it for you. If you're embarrassed of the question you want to ask, then that way no one would have to know that it's you asking the question. So that website there is dementiacarecentral.com, and you can find a list of online support groups there. Okay, dementia behavioral problems. Someone just mentioned to me recently that they heard, rather than calling them dementia behaviors, that they were calling them dementia expressions. And I love that because when there is a problem behavior, it is because the care recipient is trying to express a behavior. They're trying to express an emotion behind that behavior, rather. So they're trying to express a need, okay? So they have something going on, and they're not able, because they don't have the words for it, or for whatever reason, they're not able to express that to you. So they act out with these behaviors, right? So they're expressing themselves. It can be very frustrating and confusing for the caregiver, but if we can get to the root of the problem, we may be able to diminish some of the burden of that issue, if not completely get rid of it altogether. So some things to tell caregivers to remember. Remind them that the disease is causing that, and not their loved one's intent to be malicious. No one wants to be irritated or angry or any of that. It's uncomfortable for them, as just as much as it's uncomfortable for you, which is why a lot of times when they're experiencing these behaviors, they get agitated, right? Because they're not enjoying it either. So some tips for managing these behaviors. First thing is don't argue. Okay, so if mom accuses you of stealing her purse, say, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry, I must have misplaced it, right? Don't say, I didn't steal your purse, Mom. That's not going to be helpful, because their truth is their truth. Keep in mind their lifelong routines. One thing I hear pretty commonly from caregivers about bath time is that they are trying to bathe their loved one at night, and the care recipient is refusing, and they don't know why. And I've asked the question, well, have you tried bathing them in the morning? And they'll say, no, we haven't tried that. We're busy in the morning or whatever. But that care recipient oftentimes was a working person who showered every single morning before work. And so that was their routine. So telling them when they first get up it's time to take a shower makes a lot more sense in their mind than it does to take a shower right before nighttime if that was not their routine. So keeping that in mind. Planning ahead. So, with bath time, for example, make sure the water is prepared and the towels are in there. Everything is in there that they could possibly need. At some point, you could label the things that are in the shower, shampoo and that type of thing. If it's something like you're going on a trip, make sure you've planned for every possible scenario. If they're incontinent, bring extra briefs with you and wipes and a change of clothes and things of that nature. So all of that will keep, at least ease your mind some and hopefully make things go a little smoother for you. And then calming yourself. Take deep breaths. The care recipient is going to feed off of your emotions. So if you're super stressed out and it's obvious, they're going to pick up on that, and they're not going to understand why. So it might, increase their own stress and agitation as well. Consider the environment you're in. A lot of times people with dementia can become overstimulated, especially if it's in an unknown environment. So if they're getting angry in, I mentioned Walmart or like a Golden Corral or somewhere that's loud and there's a lot going on, consider that. That's a lot of sensory stimulation for them to try and take in at one time. And then lastly, pick your battles. We used bathing as an example a second ago. If Dad bathed yesterday and now he's fighting you over bathing today, is it really important that he takes a shower every single day or not? If he's refusing to eat his sandwich but he had a good breakfast, maybe don't argue about that, because there's going to be so many things that you could argue about. You kind of just have to pick what is really pressing and what is really important. Technological supports for behaviors. I'm going to go back here to the online support forums for the caregiver. I definitely would try out that link that I gave you and see if you could find some that are helpful to you. I also have mentioned caregiver apps. So if you do use a smartphone, just look it up. There's actually apps that are specifically for dementia behavior. So you can type in sundowning or agitation or communication or whatever, and it'll give you tips and tricks that you can try or the caregiver can try in that moment. Also, stress management for the caregiver, that's a technological support too, right? Just listening to music, watching funny videos, cat videos, whatever it is for them, but helping remind them that when they are having these troubling behaviors, their care recipient, that is, that to keep their cool, they need stress management for themselves. So all of those things could be used to help them with that. And building a care team. So a care team consists of anyone who can provide any support at all to the caregiver and the care receiver. Many times caregivers will say things like, I'm in this completely alone. I have no one, right? That's usually not the case. Often people have reached out and said, let me know if you need help. They just don't ever reach out to them. They think, oh, they didn't really mean that, or, can't do it as good as I can or whatever, but it is important that they build a team so that they don't, like we talked about, experience burnout. So examples of people would be, of course, their doctors and their nurses. If they have questions, call your doctor. Any questions you have, that's what they're there for, to call and say, hey, this is going on. Is this normal behavior? Is this the right medication? Whatever. That would be a part of your care team because they are helping to provide support. If you have home health aides or sitters or anything like that, neighbors even. Let's say the person you're caring for or that the caregiver is caring for is a wanderer. You might want to alert your neighbors and just say, hey, I'm going to be at work today, or I have to run to the store. I can't take Mom. Do you mind just keeping an eye out? People like to help usually. So even your neighbors could be a part of your care team. Your friends, any friends that you have that know what's going on, are a part of your care team, even if they're just there to, listen to you vent when you're really stressed out, even if they're not doing anything hands-on. Family members, ask. Ask when you need help. The worst they could do is say no. If you're involved in a church, churches often, of course, they'll put you on a prayer list, but also if they find out that there's a family in need, they may organize to bring over dinner for you regularly. They may have someone who's willing to come sit and provide some respite for you. Well, even if it's just so you can, do some gardening. You may not even want to leave, but just someone to hang out inside so that you can get some things done. And then look for local volunteer organizations. Your local area agency on aging, of course, should know what the local volunteer organizations are that might be able to help find some of these people. Technological supports for your care team. So, of course, apps, right? I know we talked about apps a lot here, but there are apps. I can't think of the one. It's called Lots of Helping Hands, I want to say, that all people in your care team who are interested get involved in. So it's like you can all input stuff and say maybe it'll have a calendar so everybody will know when Mom has to go to the doctor, but also you can type in little notes like went by and saw Dad at lunch. He seemed happy. I took him McDonald's, whatever. So you can kind of communicate that way, right? And everybody is communicating the same. There's also hiring websites depending on the caregiver's financial situation. If they don't qualify for any free services, I think the most popular hiring website is care.com, where you can find sitters or home health aides based on your price range, and you kind of type in what days and times you want and what you want it for and what kind of person you want, and here's what I'm willing to pay, and then people basically apply. And I know through that website you can get background checks and motor vehicle checks along with references. I think you get that the website is free for the first 30 days or something like that, and then you have to pay a small fee after, but not recommending it necessarily, just saying it's definitely worth checking out. And I know there's other hiring websites too. So again, if they're not able to get that help for free, that might be an option. And then also, basic calendars still work too. I have a basic calendar hanging up on my wall for my own family. So that's still available if you're more old school and prefer that type of calendar. So in summary, there are lots of options available. Your job, I think, is to explore those options, investigate, research, and then, try them out yourself. And then when you're talking to caregivers, it would be great to ask them after all of this, the next time you talk to them, if they've downloaded any of those apps, if they've tried any of those stress management techniques, and what worked and what didn't work, and that way you can get more knowledgeable yourself about what is out there, because all we can do is try, and do our best. If you want more information on any of this, here's all of our social media stuff, and then my email address, naomi.latini@gsw.edu, is at the bottom. Feel free to reach out with any questions, comments, or concerns you may have, and I thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thank you so much, Naomi. It was such a pleasure. Just a reminder for viewers that the PostTest is pasted onto this last slide. Please take it at your earliest convenience. A certificate can be provided, again, by entering your email address at the end of the PostTest. Please remember to view the other webinars in the Dementia Capable webinar series provided by the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving in partnership with the Georgia Division on Aging Services. Thank you, and we hope that you will join us again.